Finder.com, a comparison shopping site that has become a go-to place for consumers, made co-founder Fred Schebesta a star entrepreneur in his mid-20s. He never looked back. Again and again, Schebesta has come up with fresh ideas for the digital economy. Back in the earlier days of the internet, for instance, he launched a company that bought and resold domain names. He's here to talk about why he thinks the big tech companies are monopolies and how he's been able to thrive amongst them anyway.
Influencers with Andy Serwer is brought to you by Verizon.
Hello everyone, I'm Andy Serwer. Welcome to Influencers and welcome to our guest, Fred Schebesta, who is co-founder of the comparison shopping site Finder.com. Fred, nice to see you.
Good to see you as well, Andy.
So you're up from Australia. What are you doing in New York?
You know, we have quite a business that's really growing here. We have businesses in the UK as well, but I'm here to help keep growing our business here. And we've been rolling out this new piece of technology as well, which we can tell you about. It's a new personal financial app that automates your finances.
We want to talk all about that. Maybe we should take a step back though and tell us about Finder.com and what it is.
So Finder is, we believe that when people get more information, they're more empowered to make the decisions and choices that they need and live a better life. Because your life is a summation of all your choices. And what our vision is to better all the world's decisions. So on the site, you can see, it's a free site, all the choices you can make, say for credit cards, mortgages, insurance, through to VPNs, broadband, cell phone plans. It's a mega supermarket, like imagine an Amazon of comparison. That's what we're trying to build. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help people save money.
That's a good goal. Are there other comparison shopping sites out there? Yes, and how are you differentiated?
There's a lot of sites out there, and obviously we compete in the biggest markets around the world. I think the difference is we focus on education and empowerment first, and then once people get that information, we think they can make a better choice. So we're trying to teach people to fish rather than giving them a fish. The next thing we're really doing now is we've got this pivot, and it's quite an exciting time. About 27 days ago, we launched our first new application where you have this continuous comparison of your financial products. Now, we're moving, I guess, from really being, a media and marketing company to being more of a technology-led company. Now, that sounds strange for an internet company to say that, right? But what we're, and this is like, the late Clayton Christensen, which I'm a massive fan of.
Sure. Harvard Business School professor just passed away.
Very tragic. I'm a massive fan. We've gone and really disrupted, and we are disrupting ourselves right now. And
Innovator's dilemma.
Right. And how do you do that? So our solution to that has been to establish a second company called Fonda Ventures, and that's the company I run. Traditionally, day to day, I don't think I'm the traditional CEO. I'm much better at a small team, and I was obviously founding of Fonda, which is 310 people now. It's quite an organization. We're bootstrap funded all the way for 10 years, and so we know how to run a business, which is kind of interesting. But my real vision around this was not to create a unicorn company, but to create a phoenix company, which keeps reinventing itself, right? And so what we're about to do right now is reinvent our own core business, which is kind of scary, but kind of cool.
Talk to us about that. What is the difference? What is the 2.0 or 3.0 of Finder.com?
So today, if I was to break that down, with most services, you as a consumer, you go and you seek out that information, right? What we're trying to do is turn that around, where we come to you and bring your financial insights about your life and what you could potentially do to help make better choices. Now that might seem simple, right? But there's a lot of just barriers, right? You you zoom all the way out, particularly you take, the US is a very low comparer. I'd say in financial products, it's probably around the 20% mark. The UK is probably about 50-60%. There are big comparers. Australia is probably around the 25-30% mark. So traditionally, in the US, we go to our insurers direct, or we go to our banks direct. Whereas the behavior we're trying to encourage is, hey, before you go direct, why don't you go and check out that price? Now, the challenge there is that you've got to go out and seek all this information. And that's great. You can do that on Fonda. But what we're trying to change is the dynamic and reinvent ourselves to say, hey, we're going to come to you. And that hasn't been done before.
So are you going to try to anticipate for certain customers or any customers, new customers, what they might be looking for and push out to them to give them an entree to advice or comparison?
Correct. That's exactly right. And everyone's a different...
You mean as opposed to being static and having people just come to your platform?
Exactly right.
Great.
Exactly right.
Right.
And that's a big change.
Right. So you mentioned Amazon before, Fred. Are they a frenemy, a competitor, a customer?
They're actually one of our clients. We send a lot of traffic to Amazon. Actually, we pretty much work with, I'd say, all companies in the world. They're our clients because we obviously aggregate and compare them, and then we send them customers that are ready to buy. I think it's like if you imagine the market. I think every service and every industry goes through this phase where there are providers, and then what next happens is that you actually get these layers of services on top that aggregate the services below, right? It's a continuous phase of, I think, and when you move up, you chunk up one level and you become, I guess, that platform that sits above all these other, services all over the place. Like Expedia is much like that. If you were going to get a hotel before, you'd look at so many different hotels. Right. They kind of aggregate. Yeah. I think that's the trend, right? I think there are these services that sit on top of other services. And then what I actually think is going to start to happen, and we have this theory, our thesis is that there will be a meta service, right? So one app that you eventually go to. So imagine, and this is starting to happen, right, in China and Indonesia with Gojek and WeChat and things like that. We call them meta apps.
I understand. Yeah, I certainly know WeChat, and that's an interesting concept. I mean, isn't Amazon sort of already... Is that here, or eBay here in the United States, for instance?
You can get, you can obviously shop with Amazon, and eBay is, I think obviously eBay and Amazon traditionally have quite a rivalry, and that's really about shopping. But what we're talking about is when you go to buy, and in that user journey, there's actually a part that sits above it, which is about awareness and consideration and comparison. And then you go and buy.
And it's also with WeChat, obviously, it's communication. I mean, is that something that you are involved in or want to move the business into?
I believe that the future of commerce is chat commerce. So we are right now, before we're going to buy something, we text each other, or we WhatsApp each other, and we ask little questions. We've got this piece of information, and we've researched that. But then we can quickly get an answer right now from a social groups, right? We're sort of aggregating into these groups. And I think what will start to happen, I don't think necessarily you could buy from there, like in WeChat's case sometimes. You may still buy through other places. But what I'm talking about is in the phase of traditional sales funnel, each of these layers in that process is being filled by certain organizations. And I think it's about aggregating that all together into one meta app. And that's sort of where we're trying to go.
Right. Do you think that the Silicon Valley platforms have too much power? I mean, I'm talking about Facebook, Google. I want to drill down a little bit with Google with you, Amazon, et cetera.
So I think that those organizations have large customer bases, big moats, incredible network effects, strong brands, and those are things which create monopolies. I know that word is quite a spicy word, but it's a fact, right? And I think in terms of power on the internet and in any technology, it shifts and it moves, it ebbs and it flows, and there's something happening right now. I think it's a sort of a meta trend, and everyone just talks about it, but I actually think it's becoming more extreme. Is where everyone and not is lacking more and more time. But there's another component to that. They're lacking attention. So attention is like, am I able to context switch? How many things can I context switch? And what these big platforms have done is say, hey, I can just don't need to worry too much about changing platforms, those kind of things. I'm just going to stick with these big platforms. Now that's nice, but what's happening is these big platforms are great at serving a large amount of intents, right? Mm-hmm. But what people are wanting now is they go, I don't want to go and search for it. I want to just go straight to it. And that's about time, right? That's about that time pressure. You'll find your service, which is great. And then you'll stop. I think, the biggest trend, I think, example of this is Google Shopping used to be great, but now people just go straight to Amazon. They don't even search for the product. Right? And that's that trend. But what's happening is in these big platforms, yeah, they're really powerful now, and there'll still always be these good feeders because it's kind of like general places. But my contention would be that over time you'll see them splintering off. Little verticals of them will start to pare away because there'll be better services that will actually end-to-end deliver not just a generic service, but a very focused and specialized service.
But when you talk about splintering, doesn't that run counter to this mega app that you're talking about? I don't understand.
So I think what I'm talking about with the Meta app is going through the layers.
Meta or mega or both?
Sorry, Meta.
Well, Meta. Could be mega.
Could be mega as well.
Okay, go.
Yeah. I guess when you're talking about power, I think those big platforms and their power is, I think they're very horizontal. What I was talking about is, I think the new power is when you cross channels. Google launched Google Plus and G Plus, and they tried to go into that chat layer, didn't quite work. It just didn't happen, right? And Facebook's got a sort of certain corner of it. Amazon's got a certain part of that place. Google sits really above in that comparison, the searching and intents place that feeds into everyone else. And I think, but what's happening with those ones is they're having to fight now in their categories. But there's someone I think is going to come through and aggregate it all together.
Why has China developed these meta apps where they haven't developed elsewhere?
So I think a large, you look at countries which had desktop computers or personal computers, they went through that personal computer revolution. And so when we thought about going on the internet, we thought, let's go on a computer. And that's been trained into us. Now, a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, most people don't have a computer. They don't even have a laptop. They think of their phone as the computer. Some of them even think of Facebook as the internet, right? That's the level. So given that they're mobile first, and that they just skipped that whole desktop thing and went straight to it, when you're operating in a mobile environment, it's much, much easier to use a Meta app. And so it's about convenience.
Got it. Going back to Google, you knocked heads with them, or at least got socked in the gut by them. Tell us about that experience. And it sounds like maybe you're not as susceptible to that today as you were back then.
I call it we went to Google jail. And I take responsibility for that. I really wiped out. We lost about 80% of our traffic. You go down 200 places in Google, it's not good.
Wow.
It's not a great experience. And for 3 months we experienced that. We unlocked and fixed up our site, and then we got out of Google jail.
When was that and why?
It was 2010. We were publishing, I'd say, not the most high quality pages. We were doing some tactics that I'd say were, in those days they were gray, but then Google changed them to being black. And that's just the ebb and flow of search engine optimization. It has changed over time so much. And now we bought a samurai sword. It's a physical actual samurai sword in our reception, and it's on the wall. And it is sharp, right? It's in a case now, but we used to have it not in the case, but that was the way you started. And it reminds us that our tactics they're extremely sharp and powerful, but they can cut us as well. And so, we learned that lesson. And from there, we stopped being a tactics company and to actually think about the customer, empowering them, and what are we actually delivering as a company? And I think that's that moment in time when companies become, little startup and getting product market fit to actually, okay, we're going to build this organization. And in the beginning, we didn't really know what the vision and the strategy of our company was and where we'd go. We always thought, okay, at some point we're going to go to the US. I don't know how, don't know why, but we're just going to put that up there. And I think we've always set those kind of goals. And for some reason, I think beginning with that end in mind, when you get the right people who are driven and passionate and want to achieve something every day, for some reason you figure that out.
That sword of Damocles that you've got is pretty amazing. And so today, though, are you still that susceptible to Google?
I think we get affected by its changes. I mean, we move a lot more, but we're much, much more stable.
Right.
And we've diversified our traffic sources dramatically.
Right. Fred, talk to us about how you got your start, where you grew up, and then how you became a founder of a comparison shopping site.
You know, I was, when the internet started and it sort of started becoming a little bit bigger, I thought, why can't we build websites? And so I started with, just literally myself trying to build websites.
In Australia, growing up.
Right. Mm-hmm. And Australia's got terrible internet. Like, it's super slow. And it's still slow. So this is dial-up days. And, but what I actually built, this is interesting, I actually built my first site on GeoCities, which was part of Yahoo. This is going back in the day.
Here you are.
Yeah.
All right.
Full circle, right?
Right.
So, building one of those sites, learned to code on the internet, not necessarily learned to code C++ and those kind of things. I learned those things a little bit later on. And I thought, it would be wonderful to build a website. And something is just naturally, and that's one sort of part. Then over time, I actually started selling websites for other people. And that was a brutal business. But one day, one of the clients called me up and said, hey, do you get us to the top of this Google thing? And I was like, what is that? And so that led me on the journey to learning about search engine optimization, which actually led me on a business to learn about internet marketing. And we went on to sell that business to a public company. But along the way, like the innovator's dilemma, we thought, okay, we need to reinvent ourselves. This business what is the next generation? We need to disrupt ourselves again. So we set up this little tiny company, and we sat around a desk, and we said, okay, if we were going to start a company today, with our skills and with our resources, so doing, Clayton's traditional way, what's our strengths, what are we good at, and what are the untapped things or the untapped customer needs? We wrote down all these ideas, and one of them was a poker site, one was a Mother's Day present site, one was like a Sudoku site when that was popular, and one was credit card finder. Mm-hmm. And so Finder was called Credit Card Finder in the beginning. And we just launched these sites. So the poker site kind of went okay, then it kind of failed, because poker became big, then it sort of died off. Mother's Day presents only happens one time a year.
Yeah, that didn't seem like a great idea.
Not a great
quite
idea.
Honestly.
No. Sudoku, I don't know how you make money out of, but Credit Card Finder it had the genesis of some beautiful aspects in that it's a repeatable process that we educate to people, and they came in and we could go and help them compare.
You mean, compare, find the best credit card for you, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And really that actually started, that whole idea, if you go back even further, was I just wanted to rank number one in Google for credit card, which is kind of like it's an outlandish thing to do. And we did eventually get that, and then got penalized. But I thought, what are we going to actually put on the website? And I think at its core, what I've always been about, given we went through that first business, is about, just financial frugality, education, teaching, writing, and as best we possibly can, empowering people. Because, we started our first business on a credit card, and that's just a reality. It's a tough way to live, but that's the way it goes. And I think we just started to teach that. And so there's lots and lots of experts now in Finder, and incredible writers making incredible products to help people with all the decisions that they need now. But I think, along the way, that vision of where we are today, and a lot of people, I think, they ask me, like, did you have this idea in the beginning? I said, no, but I think that evolves, and that's where that reinvention comes in, continuously recreating yourself.
So how big is the company? How many employees? Can you tell us about sales? Is it public? Is it private? Is it global? Give us a rundown.
Yeah, so 310 full-time employees. It's on track, I'd say, for 100 mil rev this year. It's a profitable company, always been profitable. No investment, no debt, fully funded. Actually, we didn't take any funding in. It was just cash flow funded. So it's kind of a bit different.
You guys own it, you and your partner?
Yep, and that's it. And some of the crew inside Finder.
Right. IPO? Look at that smile. He's like, eh.
Like, we're not trying to sell the company, today.
Or sale, right? Could be either, right?
Right. I think there are a lot of people right now pitching to us, right? Because there's a trend from these real valuation-funded companies and trying to get the next capital raise and those kind of things to real businesses that have a real vision that can show consistent, solid path to growth and profitability and actually can deliver that and know how to run a company. And I think where we would go maybe is, maybe raise some money, maybe not, who knows. But eventually I do think we might list the company because I think it's best to get liquidity for the people who have worked inside Fonda for a long time and they've made this business. I didn't make this business, they made that business. I always say, don't do it for me, do it for each other. And then I think, with that path, that brings other challenges. So we were trying to stay private for as long as possible because you can pivot and you can move. Whereas when you're public, it's a little different.
How many countries are you in, and how is it possible to operate, in different languages and compare products like that, services?
I think that last count, I think it was 83 different countries that we're publishing into. I think languages are a challenge, sure, but we hire local editors and local writers, and there are principles of what we're doing that you can take around the world. I would say that going from being a local Australian company to being and thinking like a global company is a major shift. And I think we've operationally now got to that point. I think what you've got to anticipate with that is get your core business right. Get it operationally, what we call operational excellence. Get it to operational excellence, and then you can start to scale that playbook. And so a lot of the stuff we do is principle-led. It's from our values, from our playbooks, and it scales, in that sense. There's a lot of great people that you've got to put behind that, right? So finding them and scaling like that. I think one of the things that we kind of use as well when we scale to another countries is kind of like an experiment to see what works there, and then you can take that back to the other countries. So we're really focused on the US, UK, Canada, and Australia right now as our main countries. One of the challenges, because we're like quite close to Google, is China is not so much with Google. South Korea has obviously got Naver. Russia has its own Yandex and things like that. And so we're focused traditionally on Google-led countries for now.
Got it. And you talked about a personal finance product. What is that?
Yeah, so the Fonda app, you can get it in the App Store or the Google Play Store. So there's a trend right now, and particularly the UK, I believe, is one of the leaders in fintech right now. And one of the biggest new regulation changes is the CDR, consumer data right.
Right.
I think I should say data. And what that is that the banks are being legislated to give their data to customers. So there's this thing called open banking. Now, I'm not sure how far this is. It's going to take a long time to get up and running here in the US. I'm not sure. The big banks have some fairly strong power to not allow this. But banks are actually legislated to give consumers the access to their data so that they can give that out to other third-party applications. And what we've built is an application that connects to that data. And what it does is it actually starts to give you the ability to run algorithms and actually give you, not what the bank tells you, but actually give you what's best for you. So we call it personalized comparison.
Right.
And I think that's the change, right? That's the difference, is like taking that power back to the consumer. Europe's obviously massive on this, and they've started with current accounts. They're moving into payments, so you can actually make payments through these applications. Australia's rolled out the legislation here. Canada is in the movement is about to do this as well, and New Zealand. If you look at Southeast Asia and countries like that, they kind of already have these cables into banks. JP Morgan here has just started with a new token which passes into screen scraping technologies like Yodlee and Plaid and things like that. But this is a major trend, right?
Right.
And what what we're trying to do is give people the tools to leverage this data, this new
Right.
data they have. It's like, what am I going to do with all this transaction data? And what we think is by empowering them with that, you can make better decisions in your life.
Right. A couple of last questions. First of all, as I mentioned, you're traveling from Australia. What's the situation there with the coronavirus?
So, there have been some cases. Australia's very close to Asia as well. It's just to give context as well, Australia's just gone through some massive bushfires.
Right.
And economically, that's really hurt us as a country. It's also, from a travel and that perspective as well, the third biggest industry in Australia is actually education. I think I've heard Corona beer sales are down like 32% or something like that, right? There is just some cognitive biases with, people. I think that international educational market is a big market that I think it's going to affect Australia a lot. Obviously, Australia also exports a lot of minerals. It's a massive mining country to China. It's a big exporter. I think that in terms of the spread and the pandemic infection, I can't really comment on that. It's hard to know what is the facts and what is not right now. I think it's unclear. I do think there are going to be some winners and some losers in terms of companies out of this. Some of the companies I think you'll start to see are things like where you have decentralized or at-home services, right? So, I'll shout out to Atlassian's an Australian company, but it's about shared work and shared information. I think its stock is holding up throughout this. You've got companies like Zoom, I think are really picking up. Tencent in China as well, because more video calls, less personal interaction.
Right.
I think there are some. It's interesting as the lens to look at this, right, from a pandemic situation. I do think this is a black swan. That's my personal view on this entire thing. It's literally, I think people are underestimating it and don't see the echoes that are going to come from it. There's definitely going to be some losers, right, out of this as well. Supply chain led businesses, but I actually think they'll adapt. And I actually think it'll start to actually build a more resilient, in the future, supply chain. Right.
Let me ask you about crypto. I know that's a big interest of yours, but isn't crypto over, man?
Bitcoin's been called dead, for 10 years now? Seems to still be going. I think the price is holding up pretty well throughout this as well. I think crypto is in the beginning. And it took, if you remember the internet, we went through the pets.com phase of the internet in crypto. And I actually think it needs another 5 years to cook. There are real executions. So I was just at dinner last night with the guys building in the stock exchange, the Australian stock exchange, the actual blockchain settlement layer. Like settlement of stocks right now is a small to large disaster in terms of its paper and all those kind of things, right? So it's where blockchain just does so well. And they're actually rolling out. They're actually starting to happen. It just takes time for those technologies. There was big promises. It took ages for the internet to be real. It wasn't until I'd say, Hotmail with email was the internet at all interesting to most people, when really data became fast enough on your phone, and then you could watch videos and you could stream. Then we were like, now we don't even talk about the internet really. The internet is kind of like what it is. That's the same with I think with these blockchain technologies. They need to find their place. They need to find their where that goes. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin. I think that'll continue on. I think it's like digital gold. I think it'll last on and on and on. I'm fascinated by these DeFi, so decentralized finance applications, where you can earn interest. You can earn 8% on your interest right now, and that's real. These stable coins I think are fascinating. So obviously Libra got shut down, but there are plenty of other big stable coins out there with massive market caps, right?
Right.
But it's just going to take some time to cook.
Right. And before we go, let me see this hat. So you kind of adopted New York City, it looks like here, right?
Well,
so
yeah.
The Yankee hat?
We've got the Yankee hat with Fonda on the back as well.
Right. Nice. So it's a little co-branding, co-venture there with the Yankees, right?
Yeah, we've got to get my New York on,
Right.
Big ups.
Most excellent. All right, Fred Schebesta, co-founder of Finder.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
So much.
I'm Andy Serwer. You've been watching Influencers. We'll see you next time.